Hi everybody, welcome to 2.8, Hunt, Gather, Feed the Mind. Now just a word, this is going to be a really long video. You do not want to watch it right the way through. Down the bottom under the description, there are some time tags. You can just click to the page that you need. Basically though, I'm just reading it through. I think it's the whole task is pretty self-explanatory. And it's just going to be a case of actually reading the instructions. So let's get into it. Okay, cutting to page 3, there's your table of contents. Page 4, I've underlined a few key things already here. So we're having a look at the context overview up here. And I'll just read through pretty much. So for this task, I'm reading through from here. For this task, you will complete a systematic exploration into an idea. So remember, idea is theme, message, moral, whatever you like, into an idea that you have studied in English. So that word systematic implies that there are systems here, and there are. So systematic means you have to do this in a certain step-by-step methodical way. So this involves deciding on your area of study, and then refining this through key questions. You've probably been down that track before with other subjects, other research projects, for want of a better word. Using appropriate strategies to locate information, using appropriate strategies to process information. So processing information here simply means putting things into your own words. Okay, evaluating the reliability and usefulness of selected information in relation to the inquiry. So these guys want to find out, NZQA wants to find out if you are able to choose information that is valid. You're not just going to some crazy person's website and assuming that everything that they say is real. Okay, we're looking out for fake news as the key term is these days. Okay, you must study a valid area of inquiry. According to NZQA, this assessment must be done in the context of your English learning area. So this means you'll be investigating an idea that's cropped up through your English studies, such as your personal independent reading, so that 2.9, your writing, your class discussions, your studied texts, for example, your film, your novel study for the externals, or perhaps something in connections between texts. So for example, you might look into how the stereotypical male hero has been portrayed in dystopian literature. So dystopian literature is end of the world stuff. You have a think about the theme that you have looked at this year in English. Now, your teacher has probably selected, say, a novel or poems and films and things that pretty much encompass the same thing. So you'll be quite familiar with that. So you should be good to go on that. Be careful with the idea that you choose, as it must have oomph so that you can think critically about it. Now, teachers always say, think critically, but what does that really mean? So we've got a handy graphic here, and that helps explain everything, hopefully, or it gives you some strategies to use to get yourself thinking critically. So thinking critically about what you've discovered simply means delving into the cause, asking why. Well, why has this happened? Considering consequences. Now, they could be consequences that have actually happened, or consequences that you think might happen because of something. Analyzing the parts of something, thinking of similarities. You know, I've seen this elsewhere in our community where blah, 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 blah. Weighing up the pros and cons as well. Thinking about who might agree or disagree. This group might say da, 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 da. However, the other group might disagree because, and so on. What does your idea suggest about human nature, for example? So if you have a look at our example up here, how the stereotypical male hero has been portrayed in dystopian literature, one of the things I've noticed is that there seems to be stronger women coming through now. Why is that? What's happening to the men? I don't know. it's certainly changed from, years ago it was real Superman stuff, and I think the male hero is becoming more sensitive, for example. So what does this suggest about human nature? Well, perhaps we appreciate those traits a bit more, things like that. Looking at how it compares to past or current events, especially things like, World War II, and we saw this, with the Holocaust, blah, 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 asking what it could suggest about the future as well. So one of the classic examples is studying, if you're studying something like Gattaca, it's generally a year 13 film, but some people might do it in year 12, and it's all about genetically engineered people. It's supposed to be set in the future, but actually a lot of the things in that movie we can do already. But what are the implications? So asking what if, so different scenarios, or what if this carries on, again connecting to the future. What if we changed an element, things like that. And you've got to stay open-minded about what you might find. You can't just go in thinking, I already know the answer, so this is it, so there. Actually enjoy the process of learning, looking at different sides of things. So that basically means not settling. So don't settle for the obvious answer, or what you think the answer is, or the easy answer, or you've got to keep asking questions, keep probing. Okay, next page, page 5. Again, remember you can just click ahead in the video, you don't have to listen to me rabbit on the whole time. Okay, so if you don't choose a topic that has any kind of oomph to it, then there's nothing you can really think about with it. There's nothing to say about it. So, and if you can't illustrate some primo thinking, then you actually can't pass the standard. Even for Achieve, you've got to show that you have developed your thinking, and I'll explain more about what that means later on. So there it is there. You've got to form developed conclusions. Right, so let's recap for a minute. And going back to our hunting and gathering analogy as well, I think that works to help explain a bit better. You've got to provide evidence to prove your hunting skills. So that means finding sources of information. You've got to provide evidence, a little bit of typo there, evidence that you can gather the best food. So that means the best sources, the ones that are appropriate for your needs. They've also got to be valid, up to date and so on. Be created by somebody in authority. We'll show you how to look at your sources with that light too later on. Of course, you've got to be answering your questions as well, rather than getting sidetracked. Okay, so you've also got to prove that your mind has had a good feed, and we're talking about pigging out here. That is, you've got to show what conclusions you have come to and what you think about these conclusions. So, for example, in science, you do an experiment, you turn the element on high, and the water gets so hot that it starts to boil. So your conclusion is then that when the water reaches a certain temperature, it starts to boil. So there's your conclusion. But what do you think about that? Well, we could use it for cooking our eggs. We would have to be careful of spilling it on ourselves, because we'd have third-degree burns. That all of the implications. So pretty much anything you can think critically about. Some subjects, however, are better than others. So there's your critical thinking. Keep that wee graphic that we looked at in handy, that first one on page, what was it, there you go, page 4. Okay, right, now this one here, I've given you an example to have a look at how to develop your thinking. It's really important that you do this so that you have a really clear understanding of what developed thinking means, or to get those developed conclusions. So do have a watch of this TED Talk. Try something new for 30 days. It's just a cool talk anyway. And then once you've had a look at that, read the basic conclusions that have been reached here. So that's fine. You've got to reach basic conclusions, but then have a look at all of this. Those are your conclusions with critical thinking. That's what you've got to have with this standard. The parts in red here, they are examples or evidence from the text, the video. So we'll talk more about that later, but you've got to have that evidence in there. So you take your evidence, and then from there you can springboard your thinking. Okay, let's go on to page 6. Okay, so starting at the top here, it says, wow, once you get thinking, you actually begin asking more questions, and you'll see that on that previous page. More questions means more thinking, and it becomes a cyclical thing, and that's really developing. That's what you call developing your thinking. Keep pushing for more. Now, point to note, this is vital at level 2, and that's for all of your standards, okay? So not just this one, but you've got to show that developed thinking in your essays as well at the end of the year. So it's really good practice for that. Okay, let's carry on now. So sources of information, NZQA, just so that you are really clear what your criteria involve. NZQA wants the information you select to be from written text and oral or visual text. It says oral and or visual text there because something like a documentary obviously is oral and visual, but you've got to have that range. So 5 YouTube clips or 5 Netflix documentaries are not going to cut it. You've got to have the written as well. The other thing is, remember, you have to be the one finding that information, not your teacher. Now, everyone says, how many sources? How many sources? NZQA does not stipulate how many sources. So, your books, your documentaries, your websites, the people you talk to, they're all sources of information. It doesn't say how many sources or what types of sources you should use. However, it does say the range of text needs to be sufficient for a systematic exploration. So this implies different types, different sources, and enough to get a balanced, comprehensive understanding of your idea. So there'll be more on sources of information later. If you haven't got a range of sources, you're going to get a very unbalanced report or an idea of your topic. Okay, presentation. Presentation, you can present your ideas as a written piece or an oral piece. Make sure you play to your strengths. It is going to depend on, as it says down here, at the end of the day, though, it's up to your teacher to let you know what your classroom policy will be. A lot of that is often to do with the logistics, but you'll have to discuss with the teacher. But you are actually allowed to use your written report to go towards the 2.4 standard, which is one of your writing pieces. Remember, you've got 2 pieces for that. This could be one of them. You can also do this as an oral report, so your speech, so that's 2.5. Now, that doesn't have to be a speech in front of the class. You can video it at home, or you could do a podcast, so completely oral, can't see you at all. So you might like to do that. Okay, so with regard to your externals, this is a primo assessment to do because, as we say here, clearly getting your teeth into an idea that has come up about your written text or film study for the externals is going to help you in those exams. Critical thinking about your text is vital. Completing this internal assessment will help you better understand those ideas and therefore enhance your essays for the end of the year. Whoop whoop. Happy days. Okay, let's move on. Here we are, page 7. Okay, we have checkpoints throughout the standard, and if you stick to those checkpoints, you will be fine. It's crucial that you check in with your teacher at certain points to avoid going down the wrong track. The other thing, of course, is that it's going to help you with your time management, which is everything at this level. With your teacher, fill in the dates below for each checkpoint. So you'll probably do this as a class and just fill in all these dates and then put them in your diary or something. Okay, so these are all your checkpoints. You can click on those hyperlinks there and it'll take you to the actual part where you're supposed to be working. Okay, but there's a little descriptor down here to say what each of the checkpoints is as well. Okay, I think that's it for that page. Yep, keep an eye on the checkpoint signs and then share. Just hit share if you're working digitally. Your teacher will get an email and it will let them know that you are ready for your work to be checked. Okay, page 8, your achievement criteria. What is NZQA looking for? I've broken this down into parts so that you can see them clearly. So use information literacy skills. You've got to do that in each of these. Right, what does that mean, using information literacy skills? Already been over it a fair bit. So again, it's that hunting for a range of information and primary, secondary, quantitative, qualitative. You'll see more about that later. You've got to gather from that big hunting spree. So it's like having a brainstorm first. You're hunting for all of this information, but then gather only the most appropriate information together for your topic. So that means it's up to date, it's valid, it's actually going to answer your questions, so that is relevant to your needs. You have got to be able to explain how reliable and relevant the information you use is. Excuse me. You've got to reference correctly, and you've got to be able to show that you can summarize, paraphrase, use quotations as well. Look, and you put in quotation marks in when you do that. Now, we have a template later on that you fill in, and it ticks all of those boxes, so you actually don't have to worry about anything. Okay, now here's the conclusions part. So again, the template that we give you to fill in later also helps you tick this box. So remember our example with the TED Talk. Do try something new for 30 days and how we kept thinking. That's what you've got to do, even for achieved. Okay, you've got to form these developed conclusions even for achieved. Okay, so there are a couple of catches though. So you have this big brain explosion and you think of all these things, that's fantastic, but a lot of students that I've taught will get sidetracked because sometimes you get really into your topic, and I hear this, Miss, did you know this? Oh my God, look at this is amazing. And it's like, oh mate, you're getting off track though. I know it's interesting, but it's getting off track, which is a bit of a bummer when you're really into something, but you want to get those key questions answered, and you want to prove or disprove your hypothesis as well. So do avoid getting off track. Your thought processes must spring from the evidence that you found, as we talked about before. You can see how this has been done in the TED Talk example, and as I said, the evidence is in red. So just keep going back to that TED Talk example and you will be fine. So when you do that, it helps, when you use evidence, it helps show how and why you've developed your ideas. You're not just plucking them out of the air. Look, I know this because this guy said so. You must focus on gathering information to answer your key questions, but then take it further. So this is, I'm just trying to explain what it is again. by showing what you think about the answers you uncovered. Simply finding answers to your questions is not enough. You have to think critically about those answers. Keep that TED Talk example in mind all the time, and also there's a graphic below that will help, and the critical thinking graphic that's on page 4, I think it is. Excuse me. Okay, here we are on page 9, and here is a graphic that I hope will emphasize again what you've got to be doing. I know I'm completely repeating myself, but if you really get the hang of this, you're going to be able to nail this standard. Okay, so let's look at the graphic. So the first thing is that you're going to hunt for your information about your topic. Easy peasy. And then you're going to gather together only the appropriate information. The stuff that's going to answer your key questions. From that information, you'll get your answers, and these are just basic conclusions. As you know, the left-hand column on the TED Talk example showed some basic conclusions. Here's where you've got to be, though, to pass. And as I say, many students stop here. Big mistake, you can't pass. Maybe at level 1 a little bit, but actually there's a bit of developed thinking that you needed to do then as well, but definitely level 2 is all about the thinking. But to be honest, from what I've seen in my students, this is the bit that they end up getting into. Okay, so you've got to think critically about those answers, develop your conclusions, and back to our analogy, you're feeding your mind. For merit and excellence, conclusions are reasoned and clear. So this means you're explaining your ideas fluently. So this is where students who have some decent writing skills can really get an edge, because they're able to explain fluently. And you'll have strong evidence to back up those ideas. Okay, not just a scattering of evidence, but you will have a scattering of evidence, but you'll be using it really, really well, and really integrating it into your argument. Okay, so what you say has your marker convinced, hence convincingly. Excuse me. Okay, for excellence, you've got to be perceptive. So for excellence, conclusions are insightful and or original. I do suggest you check out this slideshow. Just tap a couple of slides in, and there's some really great stuff there about what being insightful is. It does take a few seconds to load, and it will ask you if you trust it, and yeah, it's fine. Again, use our thinking critically graphic to help you with this. Perceptive conclusions illustrate a maturity and wisdom about the world. All right. Don't forget these hyperlinks that appear throughout your document, and they take you to other places in the document just to help you find the bits you need again, but also there's the things like external websites like that as well. NZQA exemplars, that's just the link there that you can go to when you want to have a look, and we actually refer to the excellence exemplar soon too. Page 10, choosing your idea. So as we explained in the introductory part, this year you studied several texts and explored ideas or themes in them. So you probably concentrated on one key theme, and then you looked at the little branches out from that theme. These texts could include what you've covered for 2.1, as I said before, and 2.2, the visual texts, or other texts you looked at, for example, with your 2.9 reading. In the table below, you need to record your texts on this side. So you can put in here, you know, maybe your novel study, Lord of the Flies, your film study, might be Gran Torino. Okay, and perhaps there's something that really caught your eye in 2.9, or perhaps you studied a short story that goes well with Lord of the Flies or Gran Torino or whatever. Okay, on this side, just list the ideas that you learned about for each of those texts. Now, there's an example up here to show you the importance of using the word that. I always tell my students a theme is not love or prejudice, because what are you saying about love? Are you saying that love is wonderful, love is rubbish? What? Prejudice. You can't say the theme is prejudice. What about prejudice? So the way to force yourself to explain the theme properly, so remember this for your essays as well, is to use the word that. So for example, some people might say, oh, my theme is human greed. No, that's just a concept. But what exactly did you learn? So you could say from your studies that humans from every socio-economic, racial and cultural background have an inherent greed. That no matter how much a person has, they will always want more. Or you could say that greed is nature's way of ensuring progress in and strengthening individuals. So they could be 3 themes that have come up under your overarching idea of human greed in your studies this year. So try and write them all down. So we've left room for 3 texts here, 1, 2, 3, but you can do fewer or more if you like. You'll probably find similar ideas stretch across all your texts, as I said before. Okay, right. Page 11. Okay, choose one idea from the list on the previous page, from that list that you've done here. Choose one idea, and that's going to be what you'll investigate, and write it in the box below, just here. Now, you'll see from the NZQA Excellence Exemplar that the student has explained what text she studied, the idea the text illustrated, and for her she did Shawshank, so it's rehabilitation and its effect on prisoners, and then what leap was made from here. What did this make the student think more about? So that's what that student is wanting to investigate. For this student, it was the effectiveness of rehabilitation. So we've got the link there again, so click on it and just have a look just at the intro. I've got it here anyway. So here's the beginning. Recently I watched Shawshank Redemption, which raises the issue of rehabilitation and its effect on the prisoners. And this made me think about the effectiveness of rehabilitation. So does it work or not? Okay, so explain here in this box why you have chosen your idea. So what text, so you're going through this process here. What text you studied, what idea was illustrated, and what it made you think about. So write that in this box. Next we're going to move on to the hypothesis. Again, you would have come up against this in, say, science, for example. And we're looking at that excellence exemplar again for that as well, and for an example. Okay, so she or he has said, my hypothesis was, is it worth investing time and money into rehabilitation programs for criminals? Now, as I said, you've probably done this in science. So one of the things to remember is that your hypothesis is generally a statement, not a question. Now, look, when I read that out, the mistake that I've told you not to do here. I said, is it? It is worth investing, so it's a statement. Your hypothesis says what you believe to be true, what you expect to happen. It is a guess that you're making based on what you already know. Okay, so this student has said, yes, it is. It is worth investing time and money into rehabilitation programs for criminals. The next step is obviously to find out, or to either prove or disprove that hypothesis. And it might be a little bit right and a little bit wrong. Okay, so as it says here, prove your hypothesis to be correct, partially correct, or incorrect. Okay, page 12. Carrying on with our hypothesis. If you struggle to write your hypothesis, there's a little pattern here that might help you. Do you have to use it? No, you don't. But if you're struggling, this might help. So there's a pattern here, yellow, green, and blue. So we'll have a look at the examples below. So let's just recap. Here's my process so far. So the idea illustrated in my text is that we all have an element of greed in us. This made me think more about greed, and if modern society really is as greedy as the texts we have studied this year suggest. My hypothesis is that modern society, so the yellow is the thing, is not plagued by inherent greed. So that's my argument. And here's the next part, sort of the modifier, because we celebrate empathy and selflessness. Okay, so here's some easier ones to think about. So my hypothesis is that cats, this one's almonds, make better pets than dogs, have wider ranging health benefits. Alright, so that's my argument. And then I'm qualifying it for the average New Zealand family than any other nut. Okay, so there's 3 parts there. So we've got your little table here, and you fill in these bits. And remember, we've got our example up here, but you've also got your example with your excellence exemplar from the NZQA exemplars. Put your hypothesis in here. 3 parts. If you don't want to use that structure, then just fill it in here. Now I know we keep repeating ourselves, as I've said there, keep repeating what to do, but it's really important that you get it right. And we're going to check now to see that you have got it right, because this is your first checkpoint. Okay, so what you need to do now is to show your work to your teacher, or either the hard copy, or hit share. Okay, page 13. Okay, still looking at the excellence exemplar. Actually, I'll put a link in there so you don't have to keep going back. We see that the student then wrote 2 key questions to help focus her investigation, or his, as she or he proves or disproves the hypothesis. So it says there, I broke this down into 2 key questions. What is rehabilitation and what does it actually involve? And secondly, how effective are the current rehabilitation programs versus the negative aspects such as cost of these programs, and how could these be improved? So comprehensive questions there. It's really important to write top-notch questions for your research. These questions will help you achieve your research purpose. You must write questions that will help you investigate your hypothesis. So keep your eye on the prize. If you click this picture here, it will take you to a YouTube clip called Instant Inquiry, Level 1, 2 and 3 questions. So watch the clip and then just fill in the table here. So here is what you know about the Level 1 questions, Level 2, Level 3, and then what are the best ones and why. Here's some more resources to help you write your key questions. So this one here is the ultimate cheat sheet for critical thinking. If you click on that link, it will take you to a great little sheet to help you formulate some questions. The other thing you can do is try different combinations of these words. So how will something influence, for example? Why should something impact something else? Whatever. Okay. So there's examples here that we've written for our greed idea, and you can read those. The colour coding is shown there. It relates to each column. Again, you don't have to use those, but it might help. There's a little warning here. Writing questions can be hard. It will take you a while. Don't get frustrated when the perfect questions don't just pop into your head. It's just a wee bump in the road. So just cruise. Keep discussion with your teacher going all the time. With these ones here, you'll see that the student actually fine-tuned them a bit further. To what extent have key events in New Zealand's modern society been caused by greed, rather than looking at the whole world, which would be a lot more extensive for research. So think about how you're refining things as you go. Okay, so you write your key questions in here, and then as you can see, it is checkpoint 2. Absolutely vital you get those questions checked by your teacher before you move on. Okay, page 16 now, information sources and types. So where do you find information? Well, here are a few ideas. Obviously, newspapers, books, blah, 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 blah. There's loads of things. Don't forget the people that are right in front of you. Right? You know, your coaches, your school principal, a teacher, your student, you know, your fellow students, your peers. What about things like, you know, doing a survey with them? That's a great way to get primary information. I had a student a couple of years ago that was emailing a university lecturer back and forth, and that was a great buzz. So that was a really neat way of getting his information. Don't forget things like organisations. Okay. Within your community or New Zealand or even the world, you know, why not contact the UN? Businesses, local, national, international, and then of course you've got all your things online as well. There are so many sources, it's ridiculous. You've actually got the whole world available to you now with the internet. Here's some extension things here that I'd prefer your teacher to go through with you, and it looks at what is a scholarly or academic resource or source of information. It's something also that we sort of look at a bit in what's called the CRAP test, and yes, that's the real name, a bit later on in this booklet. But these are more scholarly things that you can have a look at, investigate with your teacher. Okay, page 17, and we've just got the types of information here. Primary information is first-hand, from the horse's mouth. Secondary information, somebody else has used the primary information. They've created something, and you'll be using that second piece of work. For example, somebody did a study on boiling water. That's the primary research, but then wrote a book about it. You've read the book. That book is your secondary information there. Quantitative data and qualitative data. It's great to have some stats there. Okay, 23% of people believe, 4 out of 5 people say, and so on. So that's that quantitative data, but also the qualitative. So that's your descriptions, your ideas, your details. Now I do recommend clicking on this link to get a better explanation of what this is. And then of course you've got visual, oral and written information. Remember, you've got to have some combos there as well. Later on, the table that we get you to fill out as you do your research, you've actually got to stipulate what type of information you've used. So again, you'll be able to see if you're using too many videos, or hang on a minute, I haven't got enough written information. You'll be able to spot that straight away. Try and get at least one of each of these. Okay, as I mentioned before, this is the CRAP test, so we're on page 18. Yes, this is an actual thing. So this site here, that's just here, shows you how to evaluate a resource using the CRAP test. Now, CRAP is an acronym, obviously, so you've got to check that it's current, that it's relevant, and what else have we got here? That the speaker has authority, that it's accurate, and you've got to think about the purpose. Why is it being produced? I think if you just carry on through these, it will be quite self-explanatory. One little thing that is really incredible that people don't notice is, if you have a look at your Google searches, do check the dates. I always check these dates here, because you might be looking at whatever, something about technology in particular, and you always want the most up-to-date information, and you suddenly realize that the video that you're watching on how to do something is actually 2012, and it's way out of date. Okay, some things that doesn't matter so much, but just be aware of it. So is it current? Is it relevant? Or are you getting sidetracked again? Remember, we talked about getting sidetracked. And remember, if you're not proving or disproving your hypothesis, you're going to get a disappointing grade, and we don't want to feel like these guys here. Here's your authority. Okay, so is it just some random who wants to ribbit on about something? Or is the person whose website you're on actually an authority? Now, generally with books, they're only published, a publisher will only go near them if the person has some authority on the subject, so it's a safer bet. Sometimes is what they're saying accurate? You know about Donald Trump's fake news. Even the news apparently talks fake stuff, and they do. So have a think about that. And it's also that one-sidedness. The example here is a dentist is going to say that junk food is all bad, right? But actually, who cares if you pig out on a cake of chocolate on a Friday night? What does it matter? So it's a balanced argument there. Some might argue that the psychological benefits of chocolate outweigh the tooth decay. Purpose, why was it produced? Is it an ad? That would be one key thing to keep an eye out as well on. Is it there just to persuade you? Is it propaganda as well is another thing. So we've used a war example there. Going to war is a great adventure, they said in all the literature before the war. Well, yes, it will be a great adventure, but you'll probably die or come back with no legs. So it's absolute propaganda. So are you getting the has it been produced to give you the full picture or only part of the picture? If it's trying to persuade you to do something, then it's not going to be a decent resource. It won't pass the CRAP test. Same as if it's an ad. These guys pay to come up first on the Google searches, so be careful. Page 20, plagiarism, the kiss of death. All right, you know about this, and yet still kids try it on. Do not do it. Plagiarism is stealing. Plagiarism is cheating. If you plagiarize, and I'm talking a sentence, you're likely to get a not achieved. So there's no sugarcoating it, and there's actually no need to do it. As it says here, good news, it's easy to avoid. Excuse me. Okay, so if you have plagiarized somebody else's work, it means you have copied exact words from a source as though they were your own. So you're not using quotation marks, you're just copying them. And there's no referencing either, so that's just ridiculous. Don't do it. Perhaps you've copied somebody else's words, and so many students, but I changed this word and I changed that word, I changed the sentence a little bit. Oh, no, you didn't really. You might have changed 2 words. You know that it's still copying, really. You're not processing the information, and that's the key. That's the key, isn't it? You've got to process information, and processing information means making it look like something else. So you process your eggs and your butter, blah blah blah, and all of that, and it becomes a cake. Same thing with your research. You're processing your sources into something else. So it's going to be your own words. Sometimes you will want to paraphrase. So Fred Saunders suggests that that we could really try harder with such and such. That's fine. That's paraphrasing. That's great. And you've said Fred Saunders, so you've put it in your own words. You've attributed it to Fred. That's fine, but some people don't acknowledge where the ideas came from. Okay, so you find some ideas, put them in your own words, but you don't acknowledge that actually Fred said them. Okay, so you've got to do that preferably in your text as well as in your bibliography, so just be careful. They are easy things to avoid. Okay, easy. Just do the mahi and you will be fine. We suggest using the APA referencing method. Most unis seem to use it. I think most schools are using it now. There's a simplified version of the basic parts that you need from that, but click on that link and you'll get the proper, it's a Waikato Uni version of it actually. You'll notice there that the punctuation is highlighted. That's for a reason, guys, because it's vital. Yours truly has failed an assessment at uni many years ago, admittedly, because I didn't get that right. Okay, if your bibliography is not right, it's because of death as well. So might as well get used to it now. People who study history, if you're doing history at school, you're probably already really good at this. Okay, page 21. What is the bibliography? It's the last page of your document, as the graphics shows you there. Last page of your document, and it lists all the sources that you have used, and it lists them in a certain way, and that's where that APA comes in, that APA referencing. It tells you how to list things in the text itself, so in your actual writing part, but also in your bibliography. You'll see on the source sheets that are coming up, the ones you fill in, you actually have to write the citation in that source sheet. So it's a certain way of noting what your text is, your title, your author, the publication date. There's a certain way of doing it. You have to put that into the source sheet so that it's nice and handy for your bibliography later on. So you've got to have that last page. Okay, so this guy's looking excited, but you are too. Yeah, right. Page 22, here we go. So your source records, we give you 5 source record sheets, so we'll just cut to them first. So here's page 1 of 1, and there's page 2. So there's 2 pages for each record sheet, for each source rather, and you'll fill them in, and I'll take you through the parts. If you complete those as per the instructions on the sheet, you can't fail pretty much. Okay, so we recommend you use 5 sources. Your teacher might want a different number. You'll have to discuss that with them. As we've said, so 1 source sheet for each source of information. So this wonderful student here has got a good range going, different types of information, and he or she might have a source sheet for website 1, for website 2, another and a source sheet for documentary, another source sheet for the interview, and another one for the survey of Year 12 students. Okay. Make sure I'm emphasizing a range of sources, and that your sources pass the CRAP test. If you are not sure, ask your teacher. Little on the side here, do be brave with your sources. As I said to you, one of my students emailed a university lecturer, and that was, that took some guts. And man, that lecturer was awesome for him. I know another girl that contacted some brain surgeon in America, and they actually ended up doing a Skype interview. You can do anything, all right? So give it a shot, contact Jacinda, see how you go. Here we go. Page 23, source record 1. The source sheets are all different colours, so you can keep track as well. You might want to print these off and maybe even blow them up to A3 size and write on them. Me, I'm all over typing, so I would hate to handwrite. Typing means you can edit, and then later on you can actually copy and paste the information into your final product as well. So I would type. Your source, just write in there the title, author, whatever. Title and author, or survey of Year 12 students in here. Now the citation, that means the proper way of writing it. So Saunders, Fred, I can't remember what the APA referencing is, but you might have 1978, second edition, Penguin Publishers, whatever. Okay, you've got to get that correct because you're going to use it in your bibliography later on. So there's links here to help you. APA referencing, that's the page we talked about before with the sources. This is a cool referencing generator. It takes a few clicks to get to the part you want, but once you do, it can be really neat, and it will just you put in what you've got and it pops up with the correct referencing for you. So have a go at that if you want, but just be patient and work it out and you'll be fine. It's a great life skill, which clearly I've forgotten. Whoops. Okay, the type of information, again, you can see that's a hyperlink. It'll take you back to the page talking about all of these different types of information, especially these things that you might want to brush up on again. All you have to do is highlight the one you want, or circle it so it's written and it's qualitative, it's secondary, and then you're away laughing. Just leave it at that. Your key questions. Now, I suggest that you rewrite your key questions in each of these boxes. Now, you probably only have 3 key questions. I've left room there for 4. The reason I think you should rewrite your key questions in here, and you can copy and paste them into all the other source sheets, is because then when you're reading your source and you're taking your notes, you can keep looking up at this. Okay, what was my question again? What was my question again? Am I getting sidetracked? It just, that makes such a difference. There's a hyperlink there. You click on that and it takes you back to that page where you can just pick up your key questions. So this is where you write your summary, and you could put quotations in there as well, that kind of thing, of what I found from this source to answer my questions. Now, perhaps this source here, source number 1, doesn't even answer questions 2 and 3. That's fine, but you might have lots of notes for question 1 and a few for question 4. All right, so it's okay if some squares are left blank. And again, as you're taking your notes, remember how to avoid plagiarism. Here's the second part of the source sheet. So this is where you process your information. This is where you get your developed thinking. You're thinking critically, so you're developing your conclusions. So this is not a summary of what you found. That's here. This is what you think about what you found. Okay, so you're processing your information. So it is an opinion, evaluation, solution, insight. Again, refer to your critical thinking graphic to help you, where it gives you ideas like, well, weigh up the pros and cons, or what are the consequences? What do you think are the implications of this? So this is where you pass or fail. It's also where you get excellence. And just a wee general overview of the usefulness of this resource or source, in relation to your research questions. Did it answer quite a few of them? Were you satisfied with them? Did it help you with your hypothesis? Did it really pass everything on the CRAP test? Is there an element of it that you are a little bit worried about? It might pass everything else on the CRAP test, but you're a little bit worried that it's perhaps a little bit one-sided, the source's argument. So just make a note of that, because it's showing that you can inquire in a methodical way, and you are aware of information. You are literate with information and managing information. If you don't do this, if you don't have that little discussion, you might not pass. So you've done your first sheet. Here we are at page 25. You've completed your first source sheet, and now you've got to submit it to your teacher, because your teacher needs to check that you're on the right track with it. Are you filling in that sheet correctly? Because what's the point in going on to do the rest if you're not on the right track? Okay, so make sure you do that. Checkpoint 3, hit share or give them the hard copy. So the next few pages we go right through, and they are your source sheets. You can see, as I said before, color coded. So there was green one before, we've got yellow and purple, and then a pink one. Alright, and then we're done. Here's a way to put it all together. Remember, so you've got all your information now, you've got all these source sheets. It might be you might want to print them out, I don't know, just to be able to spread them out and see them all at once. So how are you going to put all this information together? Well, here is a pretty basic way. Again, you can deviate from this, but I try and give you a bit of scaffolding to help you through it, just in case you're struggling. So remember, your report can be presented in written or oral form, although this will depend, as I said before, on the policies of your school's English department. How will you collate all the notes that you have in your source sheets? Well, here is a template to guide you through how to structure your report. Just follow the template. It takes you through step by step. So as I said before, you can of course alter the wording slightly, but we don't recommend really leaving any bits out. Listen, if you are a fluent, amazing writer and you really understand how to structure an inquiry, go for gold. If you don't, then just lean on this. It will guide you through. And then from there, you'll probably find that you can edit and really push some more. So, but here's the bones of it. So here we have the introduction. So this research is based on the idea that, remember having been introduced to this idea through the study of, and put your text in there, I became further interested in finding out My hypothesis is that again, to find out to what extent I was correct, the following key questions were developed. Again, you might only have 3, and that's fine. That does not, 4 questions does not necessarily mean you're going to get excellence over, having 3 questions. It's got nothing to do with that. Okay, now I suggest having subheading. So have the introduction subheading, and then have your next subheading, and your subheading is going to be key question 1. You don't have to write it as a question though. Okay, so this is what you could say, and you're sort of just plodding through each source of information that you used to answer key question 1. So you'll go and have a look at all that first column on each of your this column here on each of your sheets, and the next page, this one, and that's the stuff you're going to use for the first section of your report for this one. Excuse me. Go through it, and it tells you where to find the parts on those source sheets. Okay, so just go through plod, plod, plod. So continue with this pattern if you have other sources. I've only done it for a couple. And then you repeat that. Oops. Page 35. Repeat that for, here's the rest of it, for each question. So here's your subheading for question 2. As I say, continue with the structure set out for the first key question above for each key question. Remember, feel free to change words, mix it up a bit. What's shown above is just an example. Okay, so your first bit is about the sources, and you're carrying on through about question 1. By considering the information I gathered here, it's clear that, so you're coming to conclusions, and then you're relating to your hypothesis, and then here's your big kahuna thinking. Obviously I've been talking too much. I'm coughing. And there's some suggestions of how you can, some sort of sentence starters of how you can approach your conversation. There's a suggestion for how to structure your conclusion, and then remember your bibliography at the end, and all you have to do is go back to those source sheets and copy paste all of these citations and then stick them into alphabetical order. But that's where the advantage of using the computer comes in. Okay. Now, for goodness sake, proofread your work, check it again, and then you've got your draft checkpoint. So time to submit your first best version. I hate when students hand in anything because they just know they've got to get that draft in so that they can get feedback. There's actually no point if your teacher is just trying to point you in the direction of how to get rid of some of those basic errors, or they're saying things like, well, where's all your evidence? You haven't got any. You know you've got to have evidence. Get it the best you can be, because the feedback your teacher gives you is the stuff that you can't do yourself. Okay, it's those things that you hadn't considered before. So I prefer to think of the draft as the first best version. Then when you do get that feedback, do respond to it. And if you're not sure what your teacher means, because sometimes we say things in teacher speak, then ask. Okay, remember your checkpoints for your due date, or see your checkpoints list. There's your hyperlink there, and check out your due date, because if you hand it in late, you can't pass as well. So you've got to hand things in on time. As I say, all the best here for your final grade. You will do just fine. It's a massive assessment, but the spin-offs are immense. So you've got 3 key things here. If you're going to tertiary education, the research process is vital to know, like referencing and things. For your exams, this will help no end, because you'll have all those developed ideas. And on top of that, you've learned something about the world, so it's actually a really worthwhile assessment. Listen, if you follow those source sheets, then you will do fine, I'm sure. Hopefully this has been of help, and all the best.